You hearing me, old man? Or is that hearing aid turned off? The voice was young and sharp. Lieutenant Kyle asked this. His voice cut through the low noise of the dive bar like a knife. He leaned over the old wooden table. His shadow fell over the man sitting alone in the corner booth. The old man's name was Sam Carter. He did not look up. He sat very still, like a statue made from old stone. His eyes stared at the orange liquid in the shot glass in front of him. He was 72 years old. He wore a dark green shirt that had seen better days. He wore a canvas jacket that smelled of rain and wood smoke. His hands rested on both sides of the glass. They had wrinkles and age spots, but they were steady, perfectly steady. I said, "Are you deaf?" Kyle repeated, louder this time. He was showing off for the four other young Navy SEALs standing behind him. They held bottles of expensive beer. They wore grins that said they owned the world. "We need this booth. It's for active duty only. The Veteran Center is down the street." Sam slowly lifted the glass to his lips. He took a sip. He enjoyed the burn of the cheap whiskey. Then he set it back down with a soft clink. The sound was loud in the sudden quiet. He finally raised his eyes. They were gray, a bit cloudy from age, but they had a depth that felt like looking down a very deep, very cold well. "I'm fine right here, son," Sam said. His voice was like gravel rolling down a dry hill, low and unbothered. Kyle laughed. A dry, mean sound. He looked back at his group. He wanted their approval. They gave it to him with snickers and nods. Kyle turned back. His jaw was set. He was fresh off a successful mission. He was riding high on energy and feeling invincible. He saw an old man taking up the best seat in the house, someone who didn't understand the pecking order. "You don't get it," Kyle said. He placed a heavy hand on the table. He got in Sam's personal space. "We're celebrating. We're the tip of the spear. You're just taking up space. So unless you have a seal pin under that shirt, I suggest you grab your cane and shuffle along." The fight had begun. The air in the bar grew heavy. Everyone looked, but nobody moved. The Rusty Anchor was the kind of bar that served people from the nearby Navy base. It was a place where sawdust covered stains on the floor. Neon signs buzzed like annoying bugs. It was a place for loud stories and louder lies. But tonight, the group of young SEALs in the center had sucked all the air out of the space. They were the top dogs here, or so they thought. Sam sighed, a sound of deep tiredness rather than fear. He shifted on the vinyl bench. The material cracked under his weight. He picked up a napkin. He slowly wiped a water ring from the table. "I paid for my drink," Sam said softly. "I'll leave when it's empty." Kyle's face turned red. He wasn't used to being told no. Certainly not by an old civilian who looked like a strong wind would knock him over. Kyle's ego was fragile, currently blown up by recent victories, and this refusal felt like a needle poking a balloon. "Look at him," said Jake, one of the other SEALs stepping forward. "He probably thinks he's tough because he did one tour in the kitchen in '75. Hey, Grandpa, what was your job? Peeling potatoes or cleaning toilets?" The group burst into laughter. It was cruel. Sharp laughter meant to hurt. Sam didn't flinch. He kept staring at his drink, watching the light shine through the whiskey. "You guys should show some respect," said a voice from behind the bar. Tony was the bartender. He was a large man with a thick beard. He had a history in the Marine Corps that he rarely talked about. He was wiping a glass hard. "He's not bothering anyone." "Stay out of this, Tony," Kyle snapped without looking back. "This is Navy business. We're just trying to figure out who we're sharing our air with." Kyle turned his attention back to Sam. His eyes got narrow. He saw the way Sam sat. It wasn't the slouch of a beaten man. It was the stillness of a hunter waiting. Though Kyle was too young and too cocky to know the difference, he mistook the stillness for freezing in fear. "Come on!" Kyle pushed, leaning closer. The smell of expensive beer on his breath washed into Sam's face. "If you're going to sit at the Warriors table, you have to pay the toll. Tell us about your service. Who were you? Did you ever even leave the ship?" Sam stayed silent. "I bet I know," Kyle continued. His voice dripped with meanness. "You were a clerk, or maybe supply. You spent your time counting stuff while real men were out there doing the work that lets you sleep at night. That's it, isn't it?" Sam reached into his pocket. The movement was so fast that for a split second, Kyle flinched. His hand twitched toward his waistband before he stopped himself. He realized how dumb he looked, reacting to an old man reaching for a wallet. Sam pulled out a crumpled $10 bill. He placed it on the table. "For the drink," Sam said to Tony. He started to slide out of the booth. He had decided it wasn't worth it. The quiet dignity of leaving was better than a fight with children. But Kyle wasn't done. He felt embarrassed by his flinch. He needed to get back on top. He stepped in front of Sam. He blocked his exit. "Not so fast," Kyle said. He crossed his arms. "You don't just walk away when I'm talking to you. You want to leave? You answer a question first." Sam stopped. He looked up at Kyle. For the first time, a flicker of annoyance crossed his face. It was brief, like a ripple on water, but it was there. "Get out of my way, son," Sam said. Kyle laughed. "Or what? You going to hit me with your arthritis?" "Look, it's a simple question. In the teams, we have call signs. Names earned in blood and mud. Names that mean something. I'm Viper. That's what they call me because I strike before they know I'm there." He pointed to Jake. "That's Sledge. He breaks things." Kyle leaned in. His face was inches from Sam's. "So if you were ever anything more than a paper pusher, you would have a name. What is it, old man? What's your call sign? Or did they just call you Private Nobody?" The bar went dead silent. The question hung in the air, a challenge that demanded an answer. The disrespect was heavy. It pressed down on the room. Sam looked at Kyle, really looked at him. For a second, the dive bar dissolved. The smells of old beer and floor cleaner vanished. They were replaced by the thick, rotting smell of a jungle floor. The air was no longer cool. It was a suffocating blanket of heat and wetness. The neon lights were gone, replaced by a thin slice of moon cutting through thick rainforest. Sam was young again in this flash. Mud was smeared across his face. His breathing was shallow and controlled. He was holding a knife, not a drink. He was alone. He had been alone for 3 days behind enemy lines, tracking a target that whole groups of soldiers had failed to find. He moved through the plants without disturbing a single leaf. He was a ghost. He was a myth. He remembered the voice of his commanding officer over the radio. It crackled with static. "We have no help in the area. You're on your own, Reaper." Reaper. The word echoed in his mind. It brought with it memories of things done in the dark, of heavy weights carried so that others could live in the light. The weight of that name was heavier than any armor. It was a name spoken in whispers by friends, and in terrified screams by enemies. The flash ended as quickly as it began. Sam blinked. The jungle faded back into the grimy reality of the rusty anchor. He looked at the young lieutenant standing in front of him, this boy who had no idea what real darkness looked like. Sam's face didn't change, but something in his eyes did. Something ancient and cold flickered there for just a moment. "They called me Reaper," Sam said quietly. His voice was so low that Kyle had to lean in to hear it. The words hung in the air like smoke. Kyle blinked. His smile faltered for just a second, but his ego pushed him forward. He scoffed. "Reaper? What kind of action movie name is that? Let me guess. You drove a truck that harvested—" "No," said a voice from the back of the bar. Everyone turned. An older man stood up from a corner table. He was maybe in his early 60s. He wore a simple jacket, but on it was a pin, a trident, the seal trident. He walked forward slowly. His face was serious. "That's not what it means," the man said. His voice was steady, respectful. "You kids don't know who you're talking to." Kyle looked confused. "Who are you?" "Master Chief Dan Brooks, retired," the man said. He stopped a few feet away. He looked at Sam with something like awe in his eyes. "I was in the teams for 22 years, and I've heard the stories. We all have. They're legend." He turned to Kyle and the other young SEALs. Reaper wasn't a truck driver. He wasn't supply. He was a ghost, a one-man force that went where we couldn't go. Where whole teams failed, they sent him. Alone. The bar was completely silent now. You could hear a pin drop. Even the jukebox in the corner had stopped playing. Everyone was listening. "In '71, Brooks continued, his voice steady and filled with respect, "there was a prisoner camp deep in Laos, off the books, completely denied by everyone. 12 Americans were held there. The NVA had them in a place so remote, so well guarded, that command said it was impossible to rescue them. They said no team could get in, No team could get out. It was a suicide mission. Brooks paused. He looked around the bar, making sure everyone was listening. Then he looked back at Sam. Command called a meeting, Brooks went on. All the top brass. They discussed sending in a full platoon, maybe two. They talked about airstrikes, about diversions, about acceptable losses. They spent 3 days planning, and every plan ended the same way. Too many would die. It couldn't be done. He took a breath. Then someone said 2 words, "Send Reaper." The young SEALs leaned forward, their eyes wide. They sent Reaper. One man, just one. He walked in through 40 miles of jungle. He moved at night. He slept in trees during the day. He bypassed 3 enemy battalions, thousands of soldiers, and they never knew he was there. Brooks's voice got quieter, more intense. When he reached the camp, there were 30 guards, 30, all armed, all on high alert because they knew something was coming. They just didn't know what. Reaper didn't use his gun, not once. He moved through that camp like smoke, like a shadow. One by one, the guards disappeared, silently, cleanly. By dawn, all 30 were neutralized, and not a single shot was fired. Jake whispered, "How is that even possible?" Brooks looked at him. Because he was the best. Because he had trained for this his entire life. Because 12 Americans needed him to be perfect. And he was. He turned back to the group. He freed those 12 men, but 2 of them couldn't walk. They'd been beaten, starved, tortured. Their legs were broken. They couldn't move. Brooks looked directly at Sam. Most men would have called for extraction right there, would have said they did their best, but not Reaper. He fashioned a stretcher from bamboo and vines. He carried both men, one at a time, back and forth, through that jungle, for 3 miles. 3 miles doesn't sound like much, Brooks said, but in the jungle, with enemy everywhere, carrying a full-grown man, it might as well be 300. It took him 11 days to get all 12 men to the extraction point. 11 days of constant movement, constant danger. He barely slept. He barely ate. He just kept going. The room was mesmerized. When the helicopter finally picked them up, Brooks said, his voice thick with emotion now, Reaper had lost 40 pounds. He was covered in cuts and infected wounds. His feet were bloody stumps. He could barely stand. But all 12 men made it home. Every single one. Kyle's face had gone pale. His hands were shaking slightly. In '73, Brooks went on, his voice getting stronger, a Soviet advisor was coordinating attacks that were killing hundreds of our guys. He was untouchable, protected by an entire regiment. Intelligence said he was in a compound that would take an airstrike to breach. Brooks paused. They sent Reaper. He got in, got out. The advisor was never seen again. And nobody knew he was even there until it was over. Sam sat very still. His face showed no emotion. But his eyes were looking at something far away. The name Reaper, Brooks said, turning back to Kyle and his friends, wasn't given lightly. It wasn't earned in training. It was earned in the darkest places of the war. Places we don't talk about. Operations that don't exist on paper. He was the last resort, the final option when everything else failed. Jake, who had made the joke about kitchens, looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Kyle opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. I didn't know. Sir, Sam raised a hand, a simple gesture, but it stopped Kyle mid-sentence. You didn't ask, Sam said simply. You assumed. You saw an old man in a green shirt and thought you knew everything about me. You thought your recent mission made you untouchable, made you better than anyone else in this room. Sam stood up slowly. His joints creaked. But when he was upright, there was a strength in his posture that hadn't been visible when he was sitting. He wasn't tall, but he seemed to fill the space. I don't blame you for not knowing, Sam continued. His voice was still quiet. What we did was never meant to be known. We were ghosts for a reason. But the problem isn't that you didn't know who I was. The problem is that you didn't respect who I might have been. He looked at each of the young SEALs in turn. Every person you meet has a story, a history. Some of those stories are written in blood and darkness, And some of those people, they've carried weights you can't imagine so that you could stand here today and feel safe enough to be arrogant. The shame on the young men's faces was clear. Kyle looked like he'd been punched in the gut. "Sir," Kyle said. His voice was small now, stripped of all cockiness. "I'm sorry, I was way out of line. I disrespected you. I disrespected your service. I have no excuse." Sam nodded slowly. "Apology accepted, but don't apologize to me. Apologize to every veteran you meet from now on, because you never know who they are or what they've done." Brooks stepped forward. He extended his hand to Sam. "It's an honor, sir. A real honor." Sam shook his hand. A small smile touched his weathered face. "I'm just an old man having a drink, Dan. Nothing more." "With respect, sir," Brooks said with a grin, "you'll never be just anything." Kyle and his friend stood there, not sure what to do. Finally, Jake spoke up. His voice was shaky. "Sir, can we buy you a drink and maybe hear a story, if you're willing?" Sam looked at them, the young faces full of shame and newfound respect. He thought about it for a moment. Then he sat back down in the booth. "Pull up some chairs," Sam said, "and someone get me another whiskey." The young SEALs scrambled. They pulled chairs over. They sat down like students before a teacher. Kyle went to the bar and came back with a bottle of top-shelf whiskey, not the cheap stuff Sam had been drinking. "I'm not here to tell war stories," Sam said as he poured a fresh glass. "Those aren't entertainment. They're memories, and some of them are better left buried." "We understand, sir," Kyle said quickly. "But if there's anything you're willing to share, any lesson, anything, we'd be grateful." Sam took a sip. He looked at the amber liquid, thinking. Finally, he spoke. "The most important lesson I learned," Sam said slowly, "wasn't how to move silently or how to survive alone. It was this. The mission isn't about being the toughest or the fastest or the most skilled. It's about doing what needs to be done when nobody else can or will." He looked up at them. "You boys are young. You're strong. You've got your whole careers ahead of you. You'll do amazing things. But remember this. Real strength isn't about making others feel small. It's about lifting them up. It's about recognizing that everyone you meet has fought battles you know nothing about." The young men nodded. They were hanging on every word. "The missions I did," Sam continued, "they weren't glorious. They were necessary. I didn't do them for medals or recognition. I did them because my brothers needed me to, because families back home needed their loved ones to come back. That's what being a warrior really means." He paused. "When you go out there, remember that you're not just fighting for your team. You're fighting for every person who can't fight for themselves. And when you come back, you treat everyone with the respect they deserve, because you never know what weight they're carrying." Kyle nodded. Tears were in his eyes. "Thank you, sir. I won't forget this." Sam reached out. He placed a weathered hand on Kyle's shoulder. "You're a good kid. You just needed a reminder. We all do sometimes." The night continued, but it was different now. The young SEALs sat with Sam. They listened. They learned. Not about killing or combat, but about humility, about respect, about the weight of the choices they would have to make. Tony, the bartender, watched from behind the bar, a small smile on his face. He'd known who Sam was the moment he walked in. He'd recognized the way he moved, the way he sat, the quiet stillness of a man who had nothing left to prove. As the night grew late, the bar started to empty. The young SEALs thanked Sam one more time. They shook his hand with genuine respect. They left humbled and changed. Brooks stayed behind. He sat across from Sam, two old warriors in a quiet bar. "You could have destroyed that kid," Brooks said with a chuckle. "But you didn't." Sam shrugged. "What would that have accomplished? He's young. He'll learn. Better he learns from a conversation than from a mistake that costs lives." Brooks nodded. "You always were wise beyond your years, Reaper." Sam smiled, a tired but genuine smile. "I'm just Sam now, Dan. The Reaper died a long time ago." "Maybe," Brooks said, "but the man he became, he's someone worth knowing." They sat in comfortable silence. Two men who had seen the worst of humanity and somehow found a way to remain human. Outside, the neon sign of the rusty anchor buzzed and flickered. Inside, an old man in a dark green shirt finished his whiskey. He stood up slowly. He nodded to Tony, and he walked out into the cool night air. The man they called Reaper was gone, but the lessons he taught would live on in the young warriors who had been lucky enough to meet him. And in a dive bar near a Navy base, the legend grew, not of a killer or a ghost, but of a man who had done terrible things in the name of good, and who carried that weight with quiet dignity. A reminder that true warriors don't need to brag. They just need to be ready when called. Sam's story reminds us that heroes walk among us, often in the quietest forms. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories of unassuming heroes.